Lisa Renae Nelson is a licensed marriage and family therapist who's been actively practicing equine facilitated psychotherapy since 2007. Her father put her on a horse at age 2, and by age 4, she was riding independently and long on her way to a lifelong love affair with horses. So as a psychotherapist, she became interested in equine facilitated psychotherapy after seeing how the relationship with a horse positively affected a young teen struggling with mental and emotional issues. She's an EFP mental health, she was an EFP mental health facilitator with the National Center for Equine Facilitated Therapy, during which she created programs for service members, veterans, and their families, created and facilitated grief groups, and also a social skills group for youth with social cognitive deficits. She's worked with Dream Power in Gilroy for about 12 years, providing EFP for children, teens, adults, and veterans. And she's currently in EFP private practice for the last 10 years on her property in Woodside and contracts with a local intensive outpatient program providing EFP. She's certified by PATH International as an equine specialist in mental health and learning. And she authored a chapter entitled Learning and Healing with Horses in a book called Stable Wisdom, and co-wrote an article entitled Hospice Teams Up with Horses. And lastly, she's featured in a short Stanford MFA documentary entitled Tanglewood with a client who had terminal cancer. And I'm going to include the link to, or actually, if you look at your chat now, you'll see a link to the trailer. And yes, and if you would like to donate to PHS, there's also a link to that in the chat as well. So without further ado, please welcome Lisa Renae.
Thank you, Maravik. I really appreciate that. So the biggest question that I get is why work with horses? And pretty much the answer is, well, I'm going to tell you the answer. So there's a huge difference between the dog and the horse. And a lot of people get that confused when they say, well, isn't it just sort of like a big dog? And it's not. The biggest difference is that dogs are predators and horses are prey animals. So dogs, we've domesticated them, you know, they're our best friend. We've domesticated them for I don't know how long. And they also try to please you. For instance, when you call them, they come, especially if you have a treat. And if you yell at a dog or use a stern voice, they exhibit submissive behavior. But the difference with horses is they don't have that drive to please us. Because they're prey animals, their brains are wired completely differently. They're wired for safety. So you're never going to see a horse wagging his tail when you say good boy. In fact, in a horse, this can actually mean the opposite. If you see a horse swishing the tail and there's no flies around, basically they're becoming agitated. And then if you see a ringing tail, like a ringing tail kind of like going around in a circle, they are definitely agitated. So I've just noticed that a lot of people, when they're around horses, they read signs that the horse is giving like they're a dog. And that can actually be sometimes a little bit dangerous for the person. So predators want to eat horses, and humans are predators. So what you're doing is you're asking a prey animal to trust a predator. So if you're trying to figure out who are predators, if you look at humans, our eyes face forward. Dogs' eyes face forward, wolves face forward, mountain lions face forward. If you look at a prey animal, their eyes are actually on the side of their heads. And that's so they have almost a 360-degree view from where the eyes are located. The horse's ocular anatomy is very, very different from ours. So their eyes actually are seeing things magnified. So to give you an example of that is when I first got Raffe and we brought him home in the trailer, we immediately put him in the corral so he could kind of de-stress and walk around. And at that very moment that we put him in, I have now a friendly feral cat, quite large. He's like a yellowish tabby cat, and he went blasting through the corral, and Raffe absolutely exploded. And I'm going, okay, well, if it was just a tiny little cat, why would he have that reaction? Well, because of the magnification in their eyes. What does a yellowish feline cat remind you of? Right? Mountain lions. So that's why he reacted that way. Also, horses have this innate ability to sense danger, and they read subtle cues while being in the wild. For an example, if a wolf is, say, 300 feet away and the horse sees the wolf, they can actually tell the intention of that wolf as whether they're lunch that day or not. So this is an excellent skill in reading human emotions. And the beauty of this is this occurs frequently before the human is even aware of their own emotions. So you can't trick a horse. If you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got to walk this horse and I'm really scared, but I'm going to put on like I'm a cool face type thing, they're not going to look at your face. They're going to pick up your cues inside, and they will get nervous if you're nervous. To give you an example of in an EFP session, I was working with a teen boy and picked him up at the car where he's located, and we walked back to where the horses are, and we were doing our check-in. And he was saying, yeah, everything's fine, et cetera, et cetera. And we got out Raffe, and he started grooming the horse, and Raffe was starting to kind of move around and just wasn't standing still. And the boy stopped for the moment, and he went, you know what, Raffe's telling me something. And I realized I'm not okay. I got in this argument with mom in the car, and I'm pretty upset about it. So because he had checked in and he knew this aspect, we were able to process something that we may not have been able to process. Also, horses don't lie. They're incapable of lying. So I don't know about you, but I have a dog that loves socks. And I can be, in the kitchen, and I'll hear my dog walking very slowly, and I will invariably turn around, and sure enough, he's got a sock in his mouth. Or I'll come around the corner, and all of a sudden his chin's on the floor with his paws, and there happens to be a sock that is under him. So horses don't do that. They live in the present moment, and they express themselves authentically. And they reflect back to us our own emotions. So in doing so, they help people identify their feelings when they're not in touch with their own feelings. So they're also comfortable with people's authentic, genuine emotions. So if you're angry and you're showing that you're angry, they're fine with that, as long as the emotions are congruent with what you're expressing non-verbally. So when I explain this to my clients, I say, look, your insides have to match your outsides, and the horses will know if your insides aren't matching your outsides. So this is one of the very valuable reasons it makes the equine an invaluable co-therapist. So they're just very good at reading humans. And this ability allows the equine to be a non-threatening teacher, because let's face it, it's easier to hear feedback from a horse than sometimes it is a therapist or a human. I was working with an adult male, and I explained this concept about, his insides need to match his outsides, and the horses will pick up on it. And he started talking about martial arts. So he had done martial arts, and he said that he was a black belt in martial arts. And I'm going, wow, that's really great. And started asking him some questions about it. And I said, well, how long did it take you to get a black belt? And he said 2 years. And I went, wow, that is absolutely on the fast track. That is amazing. And Theo was behind us. And all of a sudden, Theo moved 6 feet away from him. And he turned and he looked back at Theo and he looked at me and he goes, what does that mean? And I just smiled at him and I said, well, you tell me. And he thought for just probably a second. Then he looked at me and he goes, I lied. And we actually started laughing about it because the horse busted him, you know, and I may not have been able to get to that issue as quickly, because what he then shared was that he felt like he had to kind of exaggerate his abilities and talents because of his insecurity, and he wanted to impress people. There is a research company out there called MathWorks, and they have done some amazing research about the equine heart. And what they found, and I find this so fascinating, is that an entrainment occurs between the horse's heart and the human heart. And the equine's electromagnetic field of their heart is 5 times stronger than ours. And that electromagnetic field can actually extend out about 30 feet, quite far, obviously. But I don't know, it's like, have you ever walked into a room and you kind of got a feeling like, ooh, there's something going on here? So we do pick up on emotions. And I think that's part of this, is this electromagnetic field. So because the horse's heart is a lot larger than ours, the horse's heart initiates the lead, and the human heart begins to follow it 30 seconds later. So I've heard innumerable times, I don't know what it is about a horse, but I just get around them and I just get so calm. And so, you know, I have worked with a lot of people that are fearful of horses. And so that 30 feet distance, if we have someone be, you know, 6 feet or 8 feet away, that entrainment still occurs. And I just see the person just kind of like start to calm down and just get more relaxed. So this is just influenced by the signals the heart sends to the brain to aid in regulating their emotions. So another thing that's so powerful in working with horses in a therapeutic environment is metaphors. Metaphors abound in this EFP practice. So it's very therapeutically effective when you ask the client what they think the metaphor could be for a related behavior of the horse. So I was working with a client, and she just started talking a little bit about the family history of the big dark secret that her father had been an alcoholic, and no one knew about it except the nuclear family. And so she started talking about this for the very first time. And the horse, we were on a big, heavy rubber mat, and the horse started just picking up with his hoof the edge of the rubber mat, dropping it. Did it again and again and again. And so I said to this person, hey, so what's the metaphor, do you think, of, you know, what the horse is doing? And she looked and she kind of smiled. She goes, yeah, sweeping it under the rug. So it just makes it easier sometimes to deal with issues in metaphor. They really get it. It's also, I love metaphor in working with substance abusers because I have a very, very long, windy kind of driveway where the horses are. And so I talk about not straying from the middle of the road. So I use the metaphor that the grass is the substance abuse, and to keep their sobriety is the horse, and to keep that horse in the middle of the road. And so the challenge is to, you know, walk this and not have the substance abuse, have the horse get to the substance abuse. And so the challenge is that the person has to keep their focus on the horse during this walk. Literally, the moment the horse knows that you are not paying attention to them, they're going to be dragging you over to the grass. And it just happens, I'd say, pretty much every single time. It also really works well, this metaphor of staying in the middle path, with ADD and ADHD, because the person, so I was working with a child who had ADD, and I also have miniature horses, as you can see. And so obviously I didn't want a small child to be pulled by a 1,000-pound horse to the grass. That just wouldn't be therapeutically effective. So he started working with the miniature horse and trying to train himself to stay focused, staying in the middle of the road and not letting his ADD get the horse over to the grass. And it did take several times, but he became so proud of himself because he was able to do that. Also, back to people who have substance abuse issues, if they finally succeed in getting the horse so that it's walking all the way in the middle without straying to the grass and coming back, then what I do is I introduce me chattering to them, because I find that it's the same thing in life. They might have a bad day. Somebody might yell at them that they love and they care about, or maybe there's a bad day at work and there's that chatter that happens. And so then we'll up the next level. And what we'll do is I'll be talking to them, and then they have to learn to stay focused on the horse and not allowing what I'm saying to get them off focus. Another metaphor that's very effective is being pushed around. So this is really good with people who have codependency issues, poor boundary setting issues, somebody who's, you know, not assertive or not speaking up for themselves. And invariably, when you are working with horses, I see this all the time. They're just going to like move into somebody's personal space. And somebody who has a challenge with these issues, I see them over and over again, moving out of the horse's way. So we talk about it, and I teach the client some natural horsemanship techniques of how to move the horse in a direction that they want. So they practice directing a horse to where they want to go is actually empowering for them, because they're going, oh my gosh, I can move a 1,000-pound animal by learning their language and learning this technique. And so they become much more self-confident about that. And by the way, practicing setting boundaries like this is also a transferable skill to the two-leggeds. So the horse is going to test a human to see who's dominant. And this is definitely not done to be mean or to win or anything negative for that. It actually is a herd-bound animal test to test the other herd members to see who's going to keep them safer. So when I did get these two horses together, and this is mutual grooming right now, this is how horses become friends. So you'll see that they'll just like, because they don't have hands, they can't scratch with their hands, so they use their teeth. So they're not being mean right now, they're actually being friendly. And that's how you can see when one's facing one way and one is facing the other way. So Raffe was the dominant horse with Theo, and it did not take that long for them to reach who was like on top of the other. Because what happened, I didn't see it, but I can tell you what happened, because this happens in the wild. It happens in herds that are, you know, maybe in some area where it's either in the wild or like in a pasture or something. And so when they're eating, another horse will slowly creep up onto another horse that's really loving their hay and then nip him in the hindquarters. And in that moment, the one that got nipped in the hindquarters knows, uh-oh, I was not paying attention for safety. And they move down one level in the herd. And the one that nipped them is saying, I was paying attention and I was keeping us safer. So with this tendency, it's inherent in the horse's brain to test the human. Now, the challenge with that, if you don't be assertive with the horse, they become more pushy with you, they listen less to you, and they increase their negative behavior. So that's why it's very empowering to learn how to address a horse's issues when they're testing you. And by the way, parenting skills. This is very effective for parenting skills. So the question is that I get also is, who can benefit from equine facilitated psychotherapy? And the answer is pretty much anyone and everyone. There are a few that I'll go into if we have time, but let's start with youngest going to oldest. So children, absolutely, it's very effective with children. In the younger children though, you need to definitely have a specific session plan and prepare ahead of time, because children learn through play. And for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a client in elementary school, and she had ADD, she had very avoidant issues, very low self-esteem, was failing her classes. There was a lot of issues that were going on with her. So, but it was very challenging to work with her because obviously she didn't want to talk about these things. So I set up stations, and she would walk the miniature horse from station to station. And so remember what I said about paying attention. So we worked on her ADD of getting from station to station by being able to go straight to the other station instead of getting pulled to the side where the grass was. And then we were to incorporate a fun activity, as I said, because children learn through play. And then we go to another station, and then I might throw in an activity or a question or whatever of something that was related specifically to the issues that we were working with. The other thing about working with younger kids is you definitely have to work with the parents. This isn't a therapy where a parent just hands me a child and says, you know, deal with the issue. You do have to work with the parents. In this instance, I set up a behavioral reward program with the parent. And the other thing is horses know that a child is a child, just like dogs do, right? So they do know that children are young and they are much more tolerant of some of their behaviors. At Dream Power, I did work with a lot of youth that were in group homes because of their emotional issues. They didn't have the skills to be able to be placed in foster care. So they were working on skills at that time in the group homes. So I was working with a young boy who was very, very anxious and depressed, and he did nonstop talking. That's how he dealt with his anxiety. And people were very frustrated with his inability to not talk. And so he was working with this particular horse, again, nonstop talking. And I literally saw the horse. He was standing by her neck. And I literally saw her reach around and completely envelop him in a horse hug. So yes, horses actually can give hugs. It's very sweet to witness. This work is really good with working with teens, especially teens who have an attitude, because it allows them to drop the attitude and become a kid again, right? So at Dream Power, I was working with a third generation gang member. And so you can imagine kind of like how he was held. And, you know, the thing is a lot of gang members have PTSD because of the violence that they've witnessed. And so this particular client was working with this small miniature horse. And the miniature horse just started becoming a little wiggly. So I explained the concept of, you know, the insides need to match the outside. I said, so, you know, how are you kind of feeling? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, I'm afraid he's going to like kick me or step on me. So I said, well, you know, if you can just acknowledge that you're a little nervous about that, you don't even have to say it out loud, but if you just can acknowledge that you're a little nervous about that, the horse is going to feel more relaxed. And then about, say, 5 minutes later, I noticed Chaco standing still. So I checked in with him. I said, hey, how are you feeling now? He goes, yeah, I'm feeling much more relaxed. And it was just a wonderful experience to see him be able to drop sort of the gang persona and actually be a kid again. Another example of that is, remember I talked about my teen boy that got in an argument with his mom. So after he was calm and talked about what had happened, we did a natural horsemanship technique. And so he was trying to have the horse move on the forehand, sort of like a tight circle with sort of his head facing you as he moves around his backside in a circle. And he was trying to make Raffe do it and trying to make Raffe do it. And he was getting frustrated. And Raffe was reflecting back what was going on. And it just was actually a beautiful sight to see in some ways, because I just was quiet and I let it happen. So then he finally stopped and they were both facing me. I was probably 10 or 12 feet away. And I said, well, you know, let's talk about that. And so he was so frustrated. And then it's like almost this light bulb happened across, you know, above his head. He goes, I'm being me and Raffy's, I'm being my mom and Raffy's being me. So we were able to then process that, and it was so therapeutic. So as I said, these are just some of the things that you can't get to easily if you're just sitting across from somebody, you know, in an office. Veterans. I would really like to talk about veterans in this work. It's very powerful. I've seen so much healing occur with veterans and horses. So obviously, a lot of the veterans have been in war zones. Many of them have PTSD. Several of them have traumatic brain injury. And the biggest disservice you can do when working with a veteran is to coddle them. You know, what they've seen, I don't even want to know, and I'm sure you don't either sometimes. So the strong recommendation is don't work with them unless you get some training. So you could, you know, read up about them. You could do CE courses, hands-on training, volunteering, etc. But many of these veterans have experienced horrific experiences of violence. And if you have a negative or visceral reaction, if and when they start sharing about these experiences, you can actually do more harm than good. So basically, you just allow the veteran and the equine to bond and get out of the way of the process. And also, a lot of times, another vet that's done some work on themselves and know the horse can help process things with a vet that's new to it. You know, I remember when I was in a situation, you know, working with a horse and a veteran, and there was some other therapists around doing the same thing. And there was this very sweet older veteran, and her background was equestrian competition. So she thought she was doing a favor, bless her heart, by telling the veteran repeatedly that he was using the grooming tools incorrectly. So at one point, I just very gently said, hey, can you kind of volunteer over in this section? So again, I can't emphasize enough, you definitely need training with veterans if you're going to work with them. EFP is also really good and effective in working with couples, especially to address certain issues like communication. There's this natural horsemanship technique that we use a lot. It's called hair, skin, muscle, bone. To give you an example of that, human example would be, Johnny, would you please go empty the dishwasher? That's hair. Skin would be, Johnny, go empty the dishwasher. Doesn't do it. It goes to muscle. Johnny, I said, go empty the dishwasher right now. Fourth one, bone. Get your patootie in there right now and do it. That's 4. So with couples, a lot of times they have communication issues. So we teach hair, skin, muscle, bone of how to move a horse with those 4 levels of communication. And then they get to look at how they communicate with each other. Does, the wife go immediately to muscle? Does the husband go immediately to bone, right? So when they practice this, it's an easier way to process it with that metaphor of hair, skin, muscle, bone. And the other thing is humans communicate with each other 90% of the time non-verbally. So in teaching natural horsemanship with them and being able to read the cues of communication that horses have, it trains them so that they can start reading non-verbal communications in their partner and address it before it starts to escalate into something they don't want it to go to. So with adults, pretty much anything you can address with EFP. I worked with a young adult who had no self-esteem. She was very codependent, very high anxiety. She was very fearful. So she kind of cloistered herself off in life. So she really did not have that much life experience. So I started with teaching her some natural horsemanship skills to move and communicate with the horse. And in doing this, she became more assertive. And the interesting thing is that she was, well, pretty much everyone is that doesn't know about horses, but she was terrified about hoof picking. So it took a very, very long time before she was even willing to start to hoof pick. And by the end of the time that we terminated therapy, that was her favorite thing. She would hoof pick. If the horse was like kind of being difficult, it's like, nope, you're going to pick that up and let me do it. And so she said that helped her feel confident so that when she was in new situations in life, she would just think about that hoof picking. It's like, hey, I got this, I can handle it. So with the horse and human, it's really more, the relationship is more of mutual respect. It's not like a dog and a human. It's more equitable in some ways. The other thing that I'm fascinated with that I'm hoping that somebody's going to be doing some more research with horses. So there is a lot of research that's being done out there with this therapy. And most of it was previously anecdotal. It's like, oh yeah, horses help people. Well, that's really great. But we want to prove it with research. And now it's really getting proven. But this one hasn't been done yet. Horses can actually hold you. You get on a horse, it can actually hold you. And I ask people, at what age, do you remember that point where, your parents said, you're too big to pick up? I remember that. I was kind of sad. but a horse can actually carry a person. And the thing that's so powerful about this is it's one of the few animals that actually has a bipedal motion. So as I was saying, it's like, I think part of the allure of this horse is that you can be held by a horse. And it has the same stride when you're walking with a horse as your hip movement. And then of course, the other thing is this heart entrainment with the horse. The other thing that I like about horses is how they learn to trust you is the same way that they learn how to trust another horse. So horses mutually groom, what I talked about. And so if you want to become a friend with a horse, you actually start grooming them. And Raffe is very communicative with this. So if you're starting to groom him and you hit like a spot that he just loves it, he's going to let you know. He'll do like stretch out his neck, do camel nose. And then a lot of times he'll just reach around and go, I want you to scratch that part. So you can create more of a bond with a horse by mutual grooming. So this whole human-equine bond and all of the benefits, I would really like to emphasize that I am a student of a horse. I will always be a student of a horse. I'm not an expert. And I learn day to day and more every time I'm with my horses. You know that, I don't know if you guys saw the movie Avatar. It was one of my favorite moments when they jumped on a horse, they took their braid and they plugged it into the horse's mane. Oh my gosh, that just gave me chills because that is what I aspire to. There is this amazing equine specialist trainer, I think his name is Mark Rashid, and he talks about in his books that he can tell when a horse is starting to have anxiety by the tightness of his skin. And I aspire to that. I am definitely not there yet. So with horses, if you're having difficulty with the horse listening to you on the ground before you get in the saddle, before you mount the horse, I would not recommend getting on that horse, because if they're expressing that on the ground, you're going to get more of that in the saddle. Because, you know, sometimes horses also wake up on the wrong side of the hay bed. I mean, that's just how it is sometimes too. So there's a lot of physical benefits with horses. I co-facilitated an MS group down in Dream Power, and we noticed that there was an increase in stability and positive mood states with the clients. And they also reported greater mobility and also reduced depression. So the other thing is essentially when you're working with a horse, you are out in nature. And I think there's that book called Nature Deficit Therapy or something like that. Being out in nature is also very therapeutic. I mean, I've heard about in Japan, they have forest bathing. So part of this powerful work is because you're out in nature. So when I was talking about grooming, so you start with grooming with a curry comb and you go in a circle and you put pressure on it. And that is helpful for people that have proprioceptive issues. So people like MS, brain injuries, sensory processing issues, because it helps the body assimilate the process and process both movement and touch. I know that a lot of you people that are listening to this have a passion about animals. So I want to talk about the ethical considerations in doing therapeutic work with horses. Because horses pick up people's feelings, they can get very stressed out. And so the general guidelines of this work is to not have a horse do more than 3 sessions a day. I have seen a horse get burned out. It was because I do all unmounted on my property because I am a solo practitioner. But I did see a horse become burned out in this program because he was too darn good. And so everybody wanted to ride him, and he just burned out doing this work. So it does happen. The other thing is that there are some programs out there that I do not ally with some of their practices. For instance, there's some group activities that are team building exercises. And so they tell the team, okay, you've got to move a horse in this corral from here to over there in that corner or whatever, but you've got to do it without touching the horse, and you also can't talk to everybody. And most of these people have never been around horses anymore, and so they're trying to move this horse to a certain place. And I think it's a safety issue for the people, and I think it's a safety issue for the horse. It stresses the horse out. He doesn't know what they're doing. And also, if somebody gets up pretty close to a horse's backside and the horse feels threatened, they could kick. Somebody could get hurt. There are some contraindications for, I would not recommend a client with these issues working with a horse. One is schizophrenia, although the meds have become very, very good lately. So a lot of people that do have this condition are able to be pretty lucid. But if they're actively having issues, I do not want a horse around them, because remember, the horse picks up on your emotions. So they're going to be trying to read this person, and it's going to be very anxiety producing for the horse. If there's somebody that has an excessive history of animal abuse, I don't think it's a good modality to use. Or if somebody is very heavily sedated, or if they are under illegal substances. And if, you know, I one time saw someone who was very high on pot, and the horse did not like being around that person. And then I think the other thing is, you know, in the wild, horses eat for 18 hours a day. They love their food. And so I really do not recommend doing this work when it's right before feeding time, because they won't pay attention to you, or during feeding time, they're not going to be paying attention to you. So I think, I did get all of the things in that I wanted to talk about, but I know that we want to get to the questions. And
Oh, a question from Louise. How does she start working with someone who has a fear of horses? If horses feel the anxiety, then how does she help create a bond?
Okay, so what you can start to do with someone like that is you start teaching them horse communication, because they don't know anything about a horse. They don't know what's going on with the horse. So I would just have them start by observing a horse in a corral. And you can pick up so many things like that. So interestingly enough, horses' ears are independent of each other. So, and that's because they're a prey animal. So they might be listening over here going, oh, what's that sound rustling there? Oh, I hear a sound over there. So if they can start to learn how horses communicate, that can help reduce them in their anxiety, because it's like, okay, I can read what this horse is doing right now. And then again, within 30 feet, there's the entrainment that happens between the horse's heart and the human heart.
Great, thanks. Oh, I think so. Shelley's, I think, was a comment. I meant to say that I've seen horses with other animals as friends. So other animals like cats, dogs, and goats.
Absolutely. So let me talk about goats. If somebody, first of all, please never, never, never get a horse and only have it by itself. A horse is herd bound, and they need another prey animal to watch over them when they do go for deep sleep. So horses do sleep most of the time standing up. Their knees actually lock. But once or twice a day, they will lay all the way down and go into deep sleep for about 15 minutes. A horse will not do this if they're by themselves. because obviously what's going to happen if a horse is in deep sleep, they could get killed by, you know, a predator. So a goat can be a great friend because they're both prey animals. So yes, so horses can be friends. I just thought of the cutest thing. Down at Dream Power, there is a 1,500-pound huge horse, and a bunny rabbit dug a burrow and was actually friends with this 1,500-pound big, huge horse and the bunny rabbit. So yeah, they can be friends. Let me, you can interject a question if you see any, Marivek. I'm going to talk about some of the terminology.
Yes, great. That'd be great.
So, in fact, ironically, after I just talked to Marivek on Wednesday, I got a telephone call, and somebody was looking for something. They said, yeah, do you do hippotherapy? And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so appropriate. So hippotherapy is a form of therapy that utilizes the horse in the session, and it's for physical reasons. So you need a prescription from either a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, or a speech therapist. And they do work with the horse mounted. And because remember I said that because the bipedal movement of the human is the same movement with the horse, a lot of physical issues can be resolved, excuse me, with being on the horse. And then you also have to have two sidewalkers, because some people that are using hippotherapy have some difficulty even sitting straight up. So you've got sidewalkers helping them stay upright. Did another question come in, or can I go to therapeutic riding?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so therapeutic riding is like the next level down. So that is also mounted work, meaning in the saddle. And that means that they can sit up independently. It doesn't mean that they don't have sidewalkers, but it's just that those sidewalkers don't have to make sure, you know, and hold on to the person to keep them up there. And that also can address, you know, cognitive, physical, emotional, and social well-being with anybody that has special needs. I think the other thing I want to say about that is you need to have a therapeutic riding instructor involved with that, and they need to be certified. Another role that someone plays is horse handler. So a horse handler obviously is in charge of the horse. So in hippotherapy, actually the horse handler is behind the horse with the long lines, having the horse turn left and right, like, you know, in a cart or in a buggy. That's how you have a horse move in hippotherapy. With therapeutic riding, the horse usually has a lead rope attached to their halter, and you're moving a horse around in the front. I also wanted to say that I am certified through PATH as an equine specialist in mental health and learning. And that is really important, because I just talked to recently, I got a call from someone who had just moved from the East Coast, and they said that they had done EFP work there, and the person had got some quick certification from an organization. So they felt that the person didn't know what they were doing. And the thing is that as a therapist, it takes a while to become an effective therapist. With somebody working with the horses, it takes a while to learn all of the subtle communications of what the horse is giving you. So this is a situation where I really recommend, if this is something that you'd like to do, please don't do it as a new therapist, because you're still learning about how to be a therapist. And if you are a seasoned therapist, you really need to get a lot of experience with horses. The other thing is, this area, let's face it, it unfortunately is quite expensive to have property. And so people want to do that. do this work, it's just a challenge to be able to do it unless you have, some other source of income. Okay, got a question?
Yes. Louise has another question. What are the best ways to establish a bond with a horse other than establishing your dominance? What are examples of some of the subtle communications the horse is giving you?
Okay. Grooming. The number one key is grooming. And I don't really like saying the word dominance. It's like it's assertiveness. Okay. So the horse actually likes it when you're assertive, and they're going to test you again. But how you start to build a relationship with a horse is on the ground and grooming the horse, because that's what horses know about other horses. It's like, hey, I'm your friend. And then they start mutually grooming each other.
Oh, what are the subtle signs? Louise was saying, if you don't mind, I guess she was asking, what are the subtle communication signs that the horse gives you? Can you share that? It was a follow-up to her last question.
Well, that's a complex question. But so let's say you're grooming a horse and all of a sudden it will sigh, right? That means obviously it likes it. If you're grooming the horse and the ear is facing you, it's like, hey, I'm paying attention to you. I like what you're doing. If a horse is licking and chewing, that's a positive sign in both ways of like, if you're doing something that they like, but also if you assert yourself and go, no, you can't come into my space, and you use the natural horseman technique to make them move back, they'll lick and chew and go, okay, I understand and I respect that. So there's a lot of subtle cues that they're constantly giving you in any moment.
Thank you. And if you go scroll up to the chat, you will see the link to the Tanglewood video that Lisa Renae is in with a client with cancer. So I highly recommend watching that. It's like 17 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
If you scroll up, you'll see that link. And again, just thank you so much for your time, for coming out this Friday afternoon. And
yeah.
Everybody.
Thank you so much. And everybody have a happy Friday the 13th.
Thank you.
Oh, it's funny. I was looking outside and it was like Raffe's facing this way. And I'm going, I swear he is looking at me right now. It's probably going, you got this, Mom.